Welcome to Sinister Memory. If you're new here, subscribe now and let us know in the comments where you're listening to this story. Let's get to today's story. The autumn of 1847 brought with it an unseasonable chill to the cobblestone streets of Boston's North End, where the salt-tinged air carried whispers of scandal that would haunt the city's collective memory for decades to come. It was on the morning of October 15th that workmen, commissioned to demolish the crumbling Mitchell residence on Charter Street, made a discovery that would transform a routine demolition into one of New England's most perplexing mysteries. The house itself had stood vacant for nearly 3 years following the disappearance of its sole occupant, Miss Ivy Mitchell, a woman of 32 years whose sudden vanishing had puzzled local authorities and neighbors alike. The property, a modest 2-story colonial structure with weathered clapboard siding and shutters that hung askew like tired eyelids, had been scheduled for demolition to make way for the expanding commercial district that was slowly consuming the residential character of the neighborhood. Foreman Patrick O'Sullivan, a stout Irishman whose calloused hands had torn down dozens of similar structures throughout the city, later described the morning's events in a sworn statement to the Boston Police Department. According to his testimony, preserved in the municipal archives, the crew had begun their work in the cellar, where the foundation stones would need to be carefully removed to avoid damaging the adjacent properties that pressed close against the Mitchell house like mourners at a funeral. The cellar itself was unremarkable in most respects. A low-ceilinged chamber with rough-hewn granite walls that wept moisture despite the dry weather. Wooden shelves lined the eastern wall, their surfaces bearing the circular stains of long-removed preserving jars and the accumulated dust of abandonment. A coal bin occupied the northwest corner, its contents long since pilfered by desperate neighbors during the harsh winter that followed Miss Mitchell's disappearance. It was while removing the flagstone flooring that O'Sullivan's crew encountered the first irregularity. Beneath the third stone from the southern wall, the workers discovered that the earth had been disturbed at some point in the recent past. The soil, rather than displaying the compacted consistency expected after decades of settlement, crumbled easily beneath their shovels, revealing a darker, richer composition that suggested recent excavation. Dr. Josiah Pembroke, the city's chief medical examiner, arrived at the scene within 2 hours of the initial discovery. His meticulous notes, housed within the Massachusetts Historical Society's collection of 19th-century medical documents, provide a detailed account of the subsequent excavation. Pembroke, a man whose reputation for thoroughness had earned him respect throughout New England's medical community, supervised the careful removal of soil from what appeared to be a deliberately constructed cavity beneath the cellar floor. The excavation revealed a rectangular depression approximately 6 feet in length, 3 feet in width, and 4 feet in depth. The walls of this makeshift chamber had been lined with carefully fitted stones, creating a sealed environment that had preserved its contents with remarkable effectiveness. Within this stone-lined vault, wrapped in layers of oiled canvas and secured with hemp rope, lay a collection of items that would challenge the understanding of everyone involved in their discovery. The first object to emerge was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Miss Mitchell's distinctive handwriting. The ink, though faded, remained legible, and the entries spanned a period of approximately 18 months prior to her disappearance. Alongside the journal lay a wooden box containing what appeared to be botanical specimens, dried flowers, pressed leaves, and various plant materials that Dr. Pembroke could not immediately identify, despite his extensive knowledge of New England flora. More disturbing were the personal effects that accompanied these items, a collection of women's jewelry that bore no resemblance to any pieces known to have belonged to Miss Mitchell, several locks of hair in varying shades and textures, and a series of daguerreotype photographs depicting individuals whom none of the investigating officials could identify. Each photograph bore a date inscribed on its reverse side, spanning the years 1844 through 1847. with the final image dated merely 3 days before Miss Mitchell's disappearance. Perhaps most unsettling of all was the discovery of what appeared to be detailed architectural drawings of various Boston area residences, each annotated with precise measurements and notations written in Miss Mitchell's hand. The drawings depicted not only the external features of these buildings, but also their internal layouts, including details that would only be known to someone who had gained intimate access to these private dwellings. As news of the discovery spread throughout Boston's tight-knit community, questions began to emerge about the true nature of Miss Ivy Mitchell's activities during the months preceding her mysterious vanishing, and what dark purpose had driven her to create such an elaborate hiding place beneath her own home. The leather-bound journal discovered within Ivy Mitchell's hidden vault would prove to be the most illuminating yet disturbing element of the entire investigation. Dr. Pembroke, recognizing the potential significance of the document, arranged for its immediate transfer to the offices of the Boston Police Department, where it was placed under the careful scrutiny of Detective Inspector Charles Hartley, a man whose methodical approach to criminal investigation had earned him considerable respect among his peers. The journal's first entry, dated March 3, 1846, began with what appeared to be mundane observations about daily life in Boston's North End. Miss Mitchell wrote extensively about her neighbors, documenting their routines with an attention to detail that initially seemed merely eccentric. She noted the precise times at which Mrs. Abigail Thornton departed for her daily marketing, the frequency with which young Timothy Brennan visited the local tavern, and the peculiar habit of Mr. Jeremiah Blackstone to water his garden exclusively during the pre-dawn hours. However, as Detective Hartley progressed through the journal's pages, the nature of these observations began to reveal a more sinister purpose. Miss Mitchell's documentation extended far beyond casual neighborhood awareness, encompassing detailed surveillance records that included the sleeping patterns of entire households, the locations of spare keys, and comprehensive inventories of valuable possessions visible through unshuttered windows. The entries from late spring of 1846 marked a distinct shift in tone and content. Miss Mitchell began recording what she termed nocturnal expeditions, describing ventures into the homes of her unsuspecting neighbors during the darkest hours of night. Her writing style, previously characterized by neat, measured penmanship, became increasingly erratic, with certain passages written in a cramped, hurried script that suggested either extreme excitement or profound anxiety. One particularly disturbing entry, dated May 17, 1846, described in meticulous detail Miss Mitchell's unauthorized exploration of the Brennan household while the family slept. She documented the layout of each room, the contents of personal correspondence found upon writing desks, and even the breathing patterns of the sleeping occupants. Most unsettling was her description of standing beside young Timothy Brennan's bed for what she estimated to be nearly an hour, observing his unconscious form while contemplating what she cryptically referred to as the profound intimacy of vulnerability. The journal revealed that Miss Mitchell had developed an elaborate system for gaining entry to these residences. She had spent months studying the habits of local locksmiths, eventually befriending one elderly craftsman named Silas Weatherby, who unknowingly provided her with detailed knowledge of lock mechanisms and key-making techniques. Through careful observation and practice, she had acquired the ability to create duplicate keys from wax impressions, a skill she employed with increasing frequency throughout the summer of 1846. Dr. Pembroke's analysis of the botanical specimens found alongside the journal provided additional insight into Miss Mitchell's activities. Several of the preserved plant materials were identified as varieties of herbs traditionally associated with sleep-inducing properties. Valerian root, chamomile, and what appeared to be extracts from poppy plants suggested that Miss Mitchell had been experimenting with natural sedatives, though the journal made no explicit reference to their intended use. The photographs discovered in the vault began to make disturbing sense when cross-referenced with the journal entries. Each daguerreotype corresponded to individuals mentioned in Miss Mitchell's surveillance records, and the dates inscribed on their reverse sides aligned precisely with her documented nocturnal visits to their homes. The images themselves were of remarkable quality, suggesting that Miss Mitchell had somehow managed to photograph these individuals without their knowledge or consent. Perhaps most chilling were the journal entries from autumn of 1846, in which Miss Mitchell began to express what she described as an overwhelming compulsion to preserve moments of perfect stillness. She wrote extensively about her fascination with observing people in states of complete unconsciousness, describing the experience as witnessing the truest expression of human nature, unguarded by the pretenses of waking consciousness. The architectural drawings found in the vault corresponded to detailed floor plans sketched within the journal's pages. Miss Mitchell had meticulously mapped not only the homes she had entered, but also several others throughout the North End, marking potential entry points, escape routes, and what she termed observation positions. The precision of these drawings suggested months of careful surveillance and planning. As winter approached in 1846, the journal entries became increasingly fragmented and difficult to decipher. Miss Mitchell's handwriting deteriorated further, and her observations took on an almost fevered quality. She began referring to her nighttime activities as communion with the sleeping city, and expressed growing concern about what she perceived as an inability to control her compulsions. The final legible entry of this period, dated December 23, 1846, contained a single haunting line that would resonate throughout the investigation. They trust so completely in the sanctuary of sleep, never knowing how thin the veil truly is. The journal entries from the winter months of 1847 revealed a disturbing escalation in Miss Mitchell's nocturnal activities, as documented in the increasingly erratic pages that Detective Inspector Hartley continued to decipher with growing unease. The careful, methodical observations that had characterized her earlier writings gave way to passages filled with an almost religious fervor regarding what she had begun to call her sacred duty as guardian of the vulnerable. January of 1847 marked the beginning of what Miss Mitchell termed her collection period. The journal entries from this time described her systematic acquisition of personal items from the homes she visited, though her selection criteria appeared to follow no logical pattern that the investigating authorities could discern. She documented taking a child's wooden toy horse from the Garrison family, a silver thimble belonging to elderly Mrs. Prudence Wainwright, and a pressed flower from between the pages of a prayer book found in the Donnelly household. Each stolen item was described in the journal with an almost mystical reverence. Miss Mitchell wrote extensively about the spiritual residue that she believed these objects carried from their owners, suggesting that she viewed them as talismans that connected her to the sleeping individuals she had observed. The jewelry discovered in her hidden vault corresponded precisely to items described in these winter entries, including a distinctive cameo brooch that had belonged to Mrs. Wainwright and a simple gold band that the journal identified as having been taken from the nightstand of a young widow named Rebecca Ashworth. The most disturbing development during this period was Miss Mitchell's increasing boldness in her nocturnal visits. Where she had previously limited herself to brief observations and quick acquisitions, the journal entries from February 1847 described extended stays within the homes of her victims. She wrote of spending entire nights moving silently through occupied residences, studying the sleeping inhabitants with what she described as scientific precision. One particularly unsettling entry, dated February 14, 1847, detailed Miss Mitchell's discovery of what she called the perfect subject in the form of young Charlotte Pembroke, the 12-year-old daughter of a local merchant. The journal described how Miss Mitchell had spent nearly 4 hours in the child's bedroom, documenting every aspect of her sleeping posture, breathing patterns, and unconscious movements. The clinical detachment with which these observations were recorded suggested a mind that had moved far beyond mere curiosity into territory that even the experienced Detective Hartley found deeply troubling. Dr. Pembroke's examination of the botanical specimens took on new significance when viewed in conjunction with these winter journal entries. Chemical analysis of the plant materials revealed traces of compounds that, when properly prepared, could induce deeper states of unconsciousness in individuals already asleep. The journal made oblique references to ensuring undisturbed observation periods, suggesting that Miss Mitchell had begun experimenting with these substances to guarantee that her subjects would remain unconscious during her extended visits. The architectural drawings found in the vault revealed the true scope of Miss Mitchell's activities during this period. She had expanded her surveillance beyond the immediate neighborhood, mapping residences throughout Boston's North End and even venturing into the more affluent areas of Beacon Hill. The precision of these drawings indicated that she had personally surveyed each location, noting not only structural details, but also the daily routines of the occupants and optimal times for unauthorized entry. March of 1847 brought a new element to Miss Mitchell's journal entries: detailed character studies of her victims. She began creating elaborate psychological profiles based on her observations of their sleeping behaviors, personal possessions, and private correspondence. These profiles revealed an intimate knowledge of her subjects' fears, desires, and secrets that could only have been acquired through extensive surveillance and repeated unauthorized access to their private spaces. The journal entries from this period also revealed Miss Mitchell's growing paranoia about discovery. She wrote extensively about her efforts to avoid detection, including the development of what she called shadow routes through the neighborhood that allowed her to move between residences without being observed by late-night pedestrians or early-rising workers. She had memorized the patrol schedules of the local constabulary and had identified several abandoned buildings that could serve as temporary hiding places if her activities were discovered. Perhaps most chilling was Miss Mitchell's evolving justification for her behavior. The journal entries from late March 1847 revealed her belief that she was performing a valuable service by documenting the true nature of her neighbors. She wrote of herself as a chronicler of human vulnerability, preserving moments of absolute honesty that she believed could never be captured during waking hours. The final entry from this period, dated March 31, 1847, contained a passage that would haunt the investigators for years to come. "I have become the keeper of their deepest truths, the witness to their most authentic selves. In sleep, they cannot lie, cannot pretend, cannot hide from what they truly are. I alone see them as God sees them." The daguerreotype photographs discovered within Miss Mitchell's vault presented Detective Inspector Hartley with perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire investigation. Each image, when examined under magnification, revealed technical proficiency that suggested extensive knowledge of photographic processes, knowledge that Miss Mitchell could not have acquired through conventional means in 1840s Boston, where such expertise was limited to a handful of professional practitioners. The photographs themselves defied conventional understanding of the medium's limitations. Daguerreotype photography typically required extended exposure times and considerable illumination, making it seemingly impossible to capture images of sleeping subjects in darkened rooms without detection. Yet the collection contained dozens of crystal-clear portraits of unconscious individuals, each taken within their own bedchambers during what appeared to be the deepest hours of night. Dr. Pembroke's consultation with Professor Amos Whitfield of Harvard College's Natural Philosophy Department provided insight into the technical impossibilities presented by these images. Professor Whitfield, whose expertise in optical sciences had earned him recognition throughout New England's academic community, examined the photographs with growing bewilderment. The clarity and detail captured in each image suggested exposure times far shorter than any known daguerreotype process could achieve, particularly under the low light conditions that would have prevailed during their creation. The subjects of these photographs ranged across Boston's social spectrum, from wealthy merchants to working-class laborers, suggesting that Miss Mitchell's activities had extended far beyond her immediate neighborhood. Each individual was captured in a state of complete unconsciousness, their faces bearing expressions of profound vulnerability that created an unsettling intimacy between viewer and subject. The positioning of the camera in each image indicated that Miss Mitchell had gained access to the most private spaces within these homes, often positioning herself mere feet from her sleeping victims. Detective Hartley's investigation into the photographic equipment revealed another layer of mystery. No daguerreotype apparatus had been found within Miss Mitchell's residence, nor had any of her neighbors reported seeing such equipment being transported to or from her home. The specialized chemicals required for daguerreotype development were not readily available to private individuals. Yet the quality of the images suggested access to the finest materials and most advanced techniques of the era. The journal entries corresponding to the photographic sessions provided disturbing insight into Miss Mitchell's methodology. She described each photograph as capturing what she termed the soul in its most honest state, believing that unconscious subjects revealed their true nature in ways that waking portraits could never achieve. Her writing suggested an almost spiritual reverence for these stolen moments, describing the process of photographing sleeping individuals as preserving the sacred vulnerability of human existence. One particularly unsettling series of photographs depicted the same subject, a young woman identified through cross-reference with the journal as Miss Sarah Cunningham, a seamstress who lived alone on Salem Street, captured over the course of several months. The progression of images revealed subtle changes in the subject's appearance and sleeping environment, suggesting that Miss Mitchell had been conducting long-term surveillance and documentation of specific individuals. The technical analysis of the photographs revealed anomalies that Professor Whitfield could not explain through conventional understanding of daguerreotype processes. The images displayed a depth of field and tonal range that exceeded the capabilities of known photographic techniques, leading to speculation about experimental methods that Miss Mitchell might have developed or acquired through unknown sources. More disturbing were the notations found on the reverse of each photograph. In addition to dates and locations, Miss Mitchell had recorded detailed observations about each subject's sleeping patterns, including precise measurements of breathing intervals, body temperature estimates, and what she described as spiritual emanations detected during the photographic sessions. These notations suggested that the photography was merely one component of a more comprehensive documentation process. The journal revealed that Miss Mitchell had developed an elaborate classification system for her photographic subjects. She categorized individuals based on what she perceived as their sleep personalities, creating detailed taxonomies that included categories such as the restless dreamer, the peaceful innocent, and the tormented soul. Each photograph was labeled according to this system, with corresponding entries in the journal that provided extensive analysis of the subject's character based solely on their unconscious appearance. Perhaps most chilling was Miss Mitchell's description of her photographic process as a form of spiritual communion with her subjects. She wrote of feeling connected to these individuals through the act of capturing their images, believing that the camera somehow transferred a portion of their essence to her. This belief appeared to intensify her compulsion to continue her nocturnal activities, as she sought to expand her collection of what she called authentic human portraits. The final photographs in the collection, dated just days before Miss Mitchell's disappearance, showed a marked deterioration in technical quality, with several images appearing overexposed or poorly focused. The journal entries from this period suggested increasing difficulty in maintaining the precise conditions necessary for successful photography, hinting at external pressures or internal struggles that were beginning to compromise her carefully developed techniques. As Detective Inspector Hartley expanded his investigation beyond the confines of Miss Mitchell's hidden vault, a disturbing pattern began to emerge throughout Boston's North End. The systematic cross-referencing of the journal entries with police records revealed that several residents mentioned in Miss Mitchell's documentation had reported unusual incidents during the period corresponding to her nocturnal activities, though none had connected these occurrences to their enigmatic neighbor. Mrs. Prudence Wainwright, the elderly widow whose silver thimble had been found among Miss Mitchell's collection, had filed a report with the local constabulary in February of 1847 regarding what she described as unexplained disturbances in her home. She had awakened on multiple occasions with the distinct sensation that someone had been present in her bedchamber, though no evidence of forced entry could be found. Her missing thimble had been attributed to simple misplacement, a conclusion that now took on sinister significance. The Garrison family had experienced similar phenomena during the winter months of 1847. Young Timothy Garrison, age 8, had complained repeatedly to his parents about feeling watched during the night, though his concerns had been dismissed as childhood imagination. The family's missing wooden toy horse, documented in Miss Mitchell's journal as one of her acquired specimens, had never been reported to authorities, as such minor household losses were considered too trivial for official attention. Dr. Pembroke's medical examination of several individuals identified in the photographs revealed subtle but consistent physical evidence supporting the journal's claims. Miss Sarah Cunningham, the seamstress who had been the subject of Miss Mitchell's extended photographic documentation, exhibited traces of botanical compounds in her hair samples that matched the sleep-inducing substances found in the vault. The presence of these materials, undetectable without specific chemical analysis, suggested that Miss Mitchell had indeed been administering her herbal preparations to ensure deeper unconsciousness during her visits. The investigation into Miss Mitchell's background revealed a woman whose outward appearance of respectability masked a profound isolation from normal social connections. Neighbors described her as polite but distant, maintaining minimal interaction with the community despite having resided on Charter Street for nearly a decade. Her financial circumstances appeared modest but stable, supported by income from seamstress work that she performed for several wealthy families in the Beacon Hill district. Church records from the North End's Episcopal congregation showed that Miss Mitchell had ceased attending services in early 1846, coinciding with the beginning of her documented surveillance activities. The parish rector, Reverend Jonathan Steele, recalled her as a quiet parishioner who had never participated in social gatherings or community events, preferring to maintain what he described as an almost monastic solitude. The architectural drawings found in the vault led investigators to examine the physical evidence of Miss Mitchell's unauthorized entries. Several of the mapped residences showed subtle signs of tampering with locks and window latches, modifications so skillfully executed that they had gone unnoticed by the occupants. The precision of these alterations suggested not only advanced lock-picking skills, but also access to specialized tools that would have been difficult for a private individual to acquire. Most disturbing was the discovery that Miss Mitchell's activities had extended beyond simple observation and theft. The journal entries from spring 1847 described what she termed environmental modifications within the homes she visited. She had begun making subtle changes to the sleeping environments of her subjects, adjusting the positioning of furniture, altering the arrangement of personal belongings, and even modifying the contents of medicine cabinets to enhance the effectiveness of her botanical preparations. The scope of Miss Mitchell's network became apparent when investigators mapped the locations referenced in her journal against the broader geography of Boston. Her documented activities encompassed an area spanning nearly 3 square miles, including residences in the North End, portions of the West End, and several properties in the more affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood. The systematic nature of this coverage suggested months of careful planning and reconnaissance. Perhaps most chilling was the evidence that Miss Mitchell had been developing what appeared to be a comprehensive catalogue of Boston's sleeping population. The journal contained references to detailed files maintained for each of her subjects, including family compositions, daily routines, financial circumstances, and what she described as vulnerability assessments. Though these files were not found among the vault's contents, their existence suggested a level of organization and long-term planning that transformed her activities from impulsive voyeurism into something approaching systematic predation. The final entries from this period revealed Miss Mitchell's growing confidence in her abilities and her expanding ambitions for what she had begun to call her great work of documentation. The journal entries from the summer of 1847 revealed a marked deterioration in Miss Mitchell's mental state as her carefully maintained facade of methodical documentation gave way to increasingly erratic and disturbing observations. The precise handwriting that had characterized her earlier entries became jagged and inconsistent, with entire passages crossed out or rewritten multiple times, suggesting an internal struggle that was beginning to manifest in her written record. Detective Inspector Hartley noted that the entries from June 1847 marked the beginning of what appeared to be a crisis of purpose in Miss Mitchell's activities. She wrote extensively about feeling observed by unseen watchers, expressing paranoia that her own nocturnal movements were being monitored by unknown parties. These concerns seemed to stem not from any actual evidence of surveillance, but from a growing awareness of the magnitude of her transgressions and their potential consequences. The botanical preparations described in the journal became increasingly complex during this period, with Miss Mitchell experimenting with combinations of plant materials that extended far beyond the simple sleep-inducing herbs she had previously employed. Dr. Pembroke's analysis of the remaining specimens suggested that she had begun incorporating substances with potentially dangerous properties, including extracts from plants known to cause disorientation and memory loss in small doses. Most disturbing was the evolution of Miss Mitchell's relationship with her photographic subjects. The journal entries from July 1847 described what she termed interactive sessions, during which she claimed to communicate with her unconscious victims through methods she never fully explained. These passages, written in an increasingly fevered style, suggested that Miss Mitchell believed she had developed the ability to influence the dreams and unconscious thoughts of her subjects. The architectural drawings from this period showed a significant expansion in scope, with detailed maps of residences extending well beyond Boston proper into the surrounding townships of Cambridge and Charlestown. The precision of these drawings indicated that Miss Mitchell had personally surveyed each location, suggesting nocturnal expeditions that would have required considerable time and planning. The sheer geographic scope of her documented activities raised questions about how she had managed to maintain such extensive surveillance while avoiding detection. August 1847 brought a new element to the journal entries: detailed descriptions of what Miss Mitchell called the watchers in the shadows. She wrote of encountering other individuals during her nocturnal activities, figures she described as moving through the darkness with purposes similar to her own. These encounters, which may have been hallucinations brought on by her deteriorating mental state, filled her with both excitement and terror as she contemplated the possibility that she was not alone in her nocturnal pursuits. The journal revealed that Miss Mitchell had begun to suspect that her activities were being documented by these mysterious figures, leading to increasingly elaborate precautions in her movements through the city. She developed what she described as counter-surveillance protocols, including the use of multiple disguises and the establishment of safe houses in abandoned buildings throughout the North End. The paranoid complexity of these measures suggested a mind that was losing its grip on reality. September 1847 marked the beginning of the final phase of Miss Mitchell's documented activities. The journal entries from this period revealed her growing obsession with what she called the perfect subject, an individual whose unconscious state would provide the ultimate expression of human vulnerability. Her descriptions of this theoretical subject became increasingly detailed and disturbing, suggesting that she was planning an escalation of her activities that would go far beyond simple observation and photography. The final coherent entries in the journal, dated in early October 1847, described Miss Mitchell's preparation for what she termed the culminating work. She wrote of having identified the perfect subject and of making elaborate preparations for an extended observation session that would represent the pinnacle of her nocturnal career. The identity of this intended victim was never explicitly stated, though the journal contained several cryptic references to the innocent who sleeps without fear. The last entry, dated October 12, 1847, just 3 days before Miss Mitchell's disappearance, consisted of a single, haunting line written in handwriting so deteriorated as to be barely legible. "Tonight, I become one with the darkness I have served so faithfully." The events of October 15, 1847, the night of Miss Mitchell's disappearance, remained shrouded in mystery despite the exhaustive investigation conducted by Detective Inspector Hartley and his team. The official police records, preserved in the Boston Municipal Archives, documented a series of unusual incidents throughout the North End that evening, though their connection to Miss Mitchell's vanishing would not become apparent until the discovery of her hidden vault 3 years later. Mrs. Adelaide Cunningham, mother of the seamstress Sarah, who had been extensively photographed by Miss Mitchell, reported to authorities that her daughter had experienced what she described as the most profound and disturbing sleep of her life on the night in question. Sarah had been discovered the following morning in a state of deep unconsciousness that persisted well into the afternoon, despite all attempts to rouse her. When she finally awakened, she complained of vivid and unsettling dreams involving a presence in her room that she could sense but never quite see. The Garrison household experienced similar phenomena that same evening. Young Timothy Garrison was found by his parents in the early morning hours, not in his own bed, but lying peacefully on the floor of the family's parlor, with no memory of how he had come to be there. The boy's wooden toy horse, which had been missing for months, was discovered placed carefully beside him, though the family was certain it had not been there when they retired for the evening. Dr. Pembroke's subsequent medical examination of both Sarah Cunningham and Timothy Garrison revealed traces of the same botanical compounds that had been found in Miss Mitchell's collection, though in concentrations far higher than any previously detected. The presence of these substances suggested that Miss Mitchell had administered significantly larger doses of her herbal preparations on the night of her disappearance, possibly in preparation for extended observation sessions. The constabulary records from that evening documented several reports of unusual activities throughout the North End. Officer Patrick McReady noted in his patrol log the observation of a figure moving through the shadows near Charter Street around midnight, though his attempts to investigate had yielded no concrete findings. The figure, described as wearing dark clothing and moving with unusual stealth, had vanished into the maze of narrow alleys that characterized the neighborhood. More significantly, 3 separate residents reported the discovery of their front doors standing slightly ajar the following morning, despite their certainty that they had been properly secured the previous evening. In each case, nothing appeared to have been stolen, though the occupants reported a vague sense that their homes had been disturbed in some indefinable way. The affected residences, the Wainwright house, the Donnelly cottage and the Ashworth dwelling, all corresponded to locations mentioned prominently in Miss Mitchell's journal. The investigation revealed that Miss Mitchell had made unusual preparations in the days leading up to her disappearance. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, who operated a small general store on Salem Street, recalled that Miss Mitchell had purchased an unusually large quantity of lamp oil and candles during the week prior to October 15th. The shopkeeper noted that Miss Mitchell had seemed particularly agitated during this transaction, repeatedly checking the street outside as if concerned about being observed. Perhaps most puzzling was the discovery, made several days after Miss Mitchell's disappearance, of her photographic equipment. A complete daguerreotype apparatus, including camera, chemicals, and developing materials, was found carefully arranged in the basement of an abandoned warehouse on Commercial Street, nearly half a mile from her residence. The equipment appeared to have been deliberately placed there, with each component wrapped in oiled cloth and positioned with the same meticulous care that characterized Miss Mitchell's other activities. The arrangement of the photographic equipment suggested that Miss Mitchell had intended to return for it, as the chemicals remained viable and the apparatus was positioned for immediate use. However, the location itself raised questions about her state of mind, as the warehouse was known to be frequented by transients and criminals, making it an unlikely choice for secure storage. The final piece of evidence from that night came from an unexpected source. Father Michael O'Brien of St. Mary's Catholic Church, located several blocks from Miss Mitchell's residence, reported that he had been awakened around 3 o'clock in the morning by what he described as the most mournful crying he had ever heard. The sound, which seemed to emanate from the direction of the harbor, continued for nearly an hour before fading into silence. Though Father O'Brien had initially attributed the sound to the wind, the discovery of Miss Mitchell's activities led him to reconsider the significance of that haunting nocturnal lament. The harbor itself yielded no evidence of Miss Mitchell's fate, despite extensive searches conducted in the weeks following her disappearance. The tides and currents of Boston Harbor were well documented, and any evidence of her presence there should have been recoverable, yet nothing was ever found. The investigation into the disappearance of Miss Ivy Mitchell officially concluded in the spring of 1848, though Detective Inspector Hartley continued to pursue leads and examine evidence for years afterward. The case file, eventually archived in the Boston Police Department's collection of unsolved mysteries, would grow to encompass over 300 pages of testimony, evidence analysis, and theoretical reconstructions. Yet the fundamental questions surrounding Miss Mitchell's fate remained unanswered. Dr. Pembroke's final medical report, submitted to the authorities in June of 1848, provided a comprehensive analysis of the psychological profile that emerged from the journal entries and physical evidence. His conclusions painted a portrait of a woman whose initial curiosity about her neighbors had evolved into a complex psychological compulsion that defied conventional understanding. The doctor theorized that Miss Mitchell had suffered from what he termed nocturnal obsessive disorder, a condition that manifested in an irresistible urge to observe and document the unconscious states of others. The botanical analysis revealed that Miss Mitchell had achieved a level of expertise in herbal preparation that rivaled trained apothecaries of the era. Her ability to create compounds that could enhance natural sleep without causing obvious harm suggested either extensive self-education or instruction from an unknown source. The latter possibility troubled investigators, as it implied the existence of an accomplice or mentor whose identity was never established. The photographic evidence continued to perplex experts long after the initial investigation concluded. Professor Whitfield's final assessment acknowledged that the technical quality of Miss Mitchell's daguerreotypes exceeded the capabilities of known photographic processes, leading to speculation about experimental techniques that had been lost with her disappearance. Several prominent photographers from New York and Philadelphia examined the images, all reaching similar conclusions about their inexplicable technical superiority. The architectural drawings found in the vault proved to be accurate to an extraordinary degree when compared to the actual structures they depicted. City surveyors who examined the plans confirmed that Miss Mitchell had somehow obtained precise measurements and structural details that would have required professional training and specialized equipment to acquire. The implications of this accuracy extended beyond simple trespassing, suggesting a level of systematic surveillance that bordered on the supernatural in its thoroughness. The fate of Miss Mitchell's extensive files, referenced repeatedly in her journal but never found among her possessions, remained one of the investigation's most frustrating mysteries. Detective Hartley theorized that these documents had been hidden in a second location, possibly destroyed by Miss Mitchell herself in the days before her disappearance. Searches of abandoned buildings throughout the North End yielded no additional evidence, though several locations showed signs of recent occupation that could not be definitively attributed to transients or other known activities. The psychological impact of the case on the North End community proved lasting and profound. Many residents reported persistent feelings of unease in their own homes, particularly during nighttime hours. Several families relocated to other neighborhoods, unable to overcome the knowledge that their most private moments had been observed and documented by their enigmatic neighbor. The sense of violated sanctuary that pervaded the community would influence local attitudes toward privacy and security for generations. Father O'Brien's account of the mournful crying heard on the night of Miss Mitchell's disappearance took on additional significance when similar sounds were reported by other residents in subsequent months. These reports, dismissed initially as imagination or coincidence, formed a pattern that suggested the presence of some lingering influence in the neighborhood. The crying was consistently described as emanating from the direction of the harbor, though searches of the waterfront never revealed any source for the sounds. The discovery of Miss Mitchell's vault had an unexpected consequence in the form of renewed interest in several cold cases from the preceding years. 3 unsolved disappearances of young women in the Boston area were re-examined in light of the evidence found in her hidden chamber, though no definitive connections could be established. The possibility that Miss Mitchell's activities had escalated beyond observation and documentation remained a source of speculation among investigators. The case files were eventually transferred to the Massachusetts State Archives, where they remain available to researchers and historians interested in the psychological mysteries of the 19th century. The journal, photographs, and botanical specimens are preserved under controlled conditions, though access is restricted to qualified scholars due to the sensitive nature of the material. The house on Charter Street was never rebuilt after its demolition. The lot remained vacant for decades, eventually becoming a small public garden that serves the North End community. Local residents, however, continue to avoid the area during nighttime hours, perpetuating a tradition of unease that connects the present day to the dark legacy of Miss Ivy Mitchell and the secret she carried with her into whatever darkness finally claimed her restless spirit. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Sinister Memory. If you enjoyed today's investigation, subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell to be alerted when we unveil our next dark chronicle. Share your thoughts about this case in the comments below. We read every single one, and your ideas often lead us to our next investigation. Until next time.